The whispers slithered through Willow Creek like a rattlesnake in tall grass when Daisy O'Sullivan stepped off the stagecoach on that scorching July afternoon in 1875. Her emerald dress, though dusty from travel, clung to her slender frame in a way that made every man's head turn and every woman's eyes narrow with suspicion. Nathan Reynolds slammed his whiskey glass down at the Rusty Nail Saloon when he overheard three drunken cowboys discussing the new arrival in town. He hadn't even laid eyes on the woman yet, but something about the crude way they laughed made his blood boil. "Heard she's from Boston," one of them drawled. "Some fancy lady with fancy ideas. Won't last a month out here," another chuckled, "though I wouldn't mind helping her pass the time." The third man, a burly fellow with a scar running across his cheek, leaned in. "Pretty little thing like that. Probably looking for a rich husband. Bet she's worked her way through half the men back east." Nathan's chair scraped against the wooden floor as he stood, his 6'3" frame casting a long shadow across their table. The saloon fell silent, even the piano player's fingers hovering motionless above the keys. "She's my future wife," Nathan stated loudly, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Watch your words." The declaration hung in the air, shocking even himself. He'd never met this Daisy O'Sullivan, but something primal had awakened inside him a need to protect a stranger's honor. Nathan tipped his hat to the stunned men, dropped coins on the bar for his drink, and strode out into the blinding afternoon sun, leaving a wake of whispers behind him. What Nathan didn't know as he mounted his horse was that his impulsive words would reach Daisy O'Sullivan's ears before sundown, setting in motion a tale that would be told in Willow Creek for generations to come. Daisy stood in her rented room above the general store, unpacking the few belongings she'd brought from Boston. At 23, she had left behind a life of comfortable predictability to accept a teaching position in this dusty frontier town. Her parents had begged her to reconsider, but after the death of her fiancé 2 years prior, the suffocating sympathy of Boston society had become unbearable. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Winters, the store owner's wife, stood with a basket of fresh bread and preserves, her round face flushed with excitement. "Thought you might need something to eat, Miss O'Sullivan," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "My, what a lovely brooch. Silver, is it?" "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. Yes, it was my grandmother's." Daisy accepted the basket with a smile. "You've caused quite a stir already," Mrs. Winters continued, settling herself uninvited on the room's only chair. "Been in town less than 6 hours and already you've got Nathan Reynolds declaring intentions." Daisy's brow furrowed in confusion. "I beg your pardon. I don't believe I've met any Mr. Reynolds." Mrs. Winters' eyes gleamed. "Oh, but he's met you at least in his mind. Stood up in the Rusty Nail not an hour ago and announced to everyone that you're his future wife." Daisy nearly dropped the basket. "He what? That's preposterous. What kind of man would say such a thing about a woman he's never met?" "The kind that doesn't take kindly to slander," Mrs. Winters replied. "Some men were speaking ill of you, suggesting you weren't respectable." Nathan shut them up quick. Daisy felt her cheeks flush with equal parts embarrassment and anger. "While I appreciate the defense of my honor, I hardly think claiming ownership of me is appropriate. Who is this man?" Nathan Reynolds owns the largest cattle ranch this side of the mountains. Came here with nothing 5 years ago and built it all himself. "Handsome as sin, but twice as dangerous when crossed." Mrs. Winters fanned herself. "Not married, despite half the unmarried women in 3 counties setting their caps for him." "Well, he can add me to the list of women not interested in his attentions," Daisy said firmly. "I came here to teach, not to find a husband, especially not one who makes declarations without so much as an introduction." Mrs. Winters smiled knowingly. "We'll see, dear. The school term doesn't start for another 2 weeks. A lot can happen in that time." After Mrs. Winters finally left, Daisy sat on the edge of her narrow bed, her appetite gone despite the tempting aroma of fresh bread. She had come west to escape gossip and to build a new life on her own terms. The last thing she needed was to become the center of town speculation, or the prize in some cowboy's misguided attempt at chivalry. Tomorrow, she decided, she would find this Nathan Reynolds and make it perfectly clear that she was not, nor would she ever be, his future wife. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of piercing blue sky that made Daisy miss the softer, cloud-filled horizons of Massachusetts. She dressed in her most practical outfit, a navy skirt and white shirtwaist that conveyed both respectability and seriousness. If she was to confront this presumptuous Mr. Reynolds, she wanted to look every inch the professional schoolteacher she was. Downstairs, Mr. Winters was opening the general store for the day. "Good morning, Miss O'Sullivan. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Indeed," Daisy replied, adjusting her hat. "Mr. Winters, could you direct me to the Reynolds Ranch? I have some business to discuss with Mr. Reynolds." Mr. Winters raised his eyebrows but didn't comment on her unusual request. "It's about 5 miles north of town. Follow the main road until you reach a split-rail fence with a big R on the gate. Can't miss it." He paused. "Though he might be in town today, it's Saturday market day." Daisy thanked him and stepped out onto the boardwalk. The town was already bustling with activity as farmers and ranchers brought goods to sell. Wagons lined the main street, and the smell of fresh produce mingled with the ever-present dust. She had just decided to check the market before committing to the 5-mile journey when a commotion near the livery stable caught her attention. A massive black stallion was rearing and bucking, nearly throwing its rider, a tall man in a dark hat who held the reins with surprising calm despite the animal's fury. "Steady, Diablo," the man's deep voice carried across the street as he skillfully brought the horse under control, speaking softly until the animal quieted. The small crowd that had gathered stepped back as horse and rider moved forward. Daisy couldn't help but stare. The man sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, his face shadowed by his hat, but his jawline clearly defined. He wore no gun belt that she could see unusual in a town where most men seemed to consider firearms as essential as boots. As if sensing her gaze, the rider looked up and Daisy found herself locked in the most intense stare she'd ever experienced. His eyes, even from a distance, seemed to pierce right through her, and a jolt of something unfamiliar shot down her spine. "Miss O'Sullivan." Mrs. Winters materialized at her side, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "I see you've spotted Nathan Reynolds." So this was the man who had so boldly claimed her. Daisy squared her shoulders. Now was as good a time as any to set things straight. She marched across the street, ignoring Mrs. Winters' gleeful expression and the curious stares of passers-by. The horse danced nervously as she approached, but the man Nathan held him steady with a gentle hand. "Mr. Reynolds," she called up to him, "I believe we need to have a conversation." Nathan removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair and features that were even more striking up close: a straight nose, high cheekbones, and those eyes. A startling blue that reminded her of winter ice on a Boston pond. "Miss O'Sullivan," he replied, his voice deeper than she expected. "I've been hoping to make your acquaintance." "Yes, I've heard." Her tone was cool. "In fact, the entire town has heard thanks to your declaration in the saloon yesterday." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "News travels fast." "Apparently not as fast as your presumption," she retorted. "I would appreciate it if you would refrain from making announcements about my future, especially when that future does not involve you." Instead of the anger or embarrassment she expected, Nathan's smile widened, revealing a dimple in his left cheek that was entirely too charming for her comfort. "My apologies if I overstepped," he said, swinging down from the saddle with fluid grace. Standing before her, he was even taller than she'd thought, forcing her to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "But I don't regret defending your honor." "My honor doesn't need defending by a stranger," Daisy insisted, "and it certainly doesn't require you to claim me like a parcel of land." Something flickered in his eyes, respect, perhaps, or surprise at her directness. Fair enough. But in my experience, the quickest way to shut down that kind of talk is to establish consequences. And the consequence you chose was marriage. She couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. It worked, didn't it? There was that smile again, confident but not unkind. They stopped talking. Only to start different, more pervasive rumors, Daisy exclaimed. Now the entire town thinks we have some sort of arrangement. Nathan glanced around at the not-so-subtle observers watching their exchange. Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private. I was about to have breakfast at the hotel. Would you join me? Daisy hesitated. Her goal had been to confront him and end the rumors, not to be seen sharing a meal with him, which would only fuel further speculation. But she was hungry, and continuing their discussion on the street was clearly providing entertainment for half the town. Very well, she agreed reluctantly. But only to clarify that there is no understanding between us and never will be. Of course, he said, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. He tied his horse to the hitching post and offered his arm. Shall we? Against her better judgment, Daisy placed her hand lightly on his arm, trying to ignore how solid and warm he felt beneath the fabric of his shirt. They walked the short distance to the hotel in silence, but Daisy was acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. The hotel dining room was nearly empty, the breakfast rush having ended. The waitress led them to a corner table and left them with coffee and promises of food shortly. You must understand, Mr. Reynolds, Daisy began once they were alone. I came to Willow Creek to teach, not to find a husband. I've left that life behind in Boston. Nathan studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. You were married before, engaged, she corrected. He died 2 years ago, influenza. I'm sorry, he said, and the simple sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Thank you. She sipped her coffee, finding it surprisingly good. My point is, I'm not looking for romance or marriage. I'm here to build a new life on my own terms. A noble ambition, Nathan said. Though Willow Creek isn't always kind to those who stand alone, it's a hard country. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Reynolds. I don't doubt it. His eyes held hers. And please call me Nathan. The waitress returned with plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. The simple food smelled delicious, and Daisy realized she was ravenous. They ate in silence for a few moments. So, Nathan finally said, now that we've established you're not my future wife, may I ask how you're finding our town so far? Daisy couldn't help but smile at his easy acceptance of her position. It's different, but I think I'll grow to like it. The children need education, and I need a fresh start. The children here are lucky to have you, he said. Our last teacher lasted only 3 months before heading back east, said the children were wild as coyotes. I'm not easily scared off, Daisy assured him. I taught in one of Boston's poorest neighborhoods for 2 years. I doubt your frontier children can be more challenging than 30 Irish immigrant boys who spoke barely any English. Nathan laughed, a rich sound that drew her attention to the strong column of his throat. I'd pay good money to see you handle the Weber twins, 10 years old and already breaking horses better than most grown men. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Nathan told her about the town, its people, and the history of the area. He was well-spoken and knowledgeable, not at all the rough cowboy she had expected. In turn, she found herself sharing stories of Boston and her journey west. So, she said as they finished their meal, now that we've had a civilized conversation, will you make another announcement correcting your previous claim? Nathan leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. Would it matter? People will talk regardless. It would matter to me, Daisy insisted. I can't have the parents of my students thinking I came here to hunt for a husband. Fair enough, he conceded. I'll make it clear there was a misunderstanding, but on one condition. Daisy narrowed her eyes. What condition? Have dinner with me next Saturday, he said. Not as my future wife, but as a new friend in town I'd like to know better. She should refuse. It would be the sensible thing to do. Yet something about Nathan Reynolds intrigued her, his confidence, yes, but also a depth she hadn't expected. "Just dinner," she stipulated, "as friends only." "Of course," he smiled, and Daisy had the distinct impression he was humoring her. "I'll pick you up at 6. As they left the hotel, Daisy couldn't shake the feeling she had just made either a terrible mistake or the best decision of her new life in Willow Creek. Only time would tell which. The following week passed in a blur as Daisy prepared for the upcoming school term. The schoolhouse, a simple one-room building at the edge of town, needed substantial cleaning and organizing. Years of dust had settled on the bookshelves, and the previous teacher had left in such haste that lesson plans and student records were scattered haphazardly across the desk. To her surprise, Nathan appeared at the schoolhouse door on Monday morning, rolling up his sleeves without being asked. "I thought you might need some help," he explained when she questioned his presence. "The place has been empty for months." Together, they swept floors, washed windows, and arranged desks in neat rows. Daisy couldn't help but notice how Nathan approached each task with the same focused attention he'd shown when controlling his spirited horse, methodical, patient, and thorough. "You didn't have to do this," she said as they took a break on the schoolhouse steps, sharing water from a canteen he'd brought. "Surely you have ranch work to attend to." "My foreman can handle things for a day," Nathan replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Besides, education matters. My mother was a teacher before she married my father. She taught me to read by lamplight after long days on our homestead." "Where are your parents now?" Daisy asked, curious about the man who had defended her honor so impulsively yet worked beside her with such quiet determination. A shadow crossed his face. "Both gone. Pa was killed by raiders when I was 14. Ma held on until I was 18, then pneumonia took her one winter." "I'm sorry," Daisy said softly. "It must have been difficult losing them both so young." Nathan nodded, his gaze distant. "It was. But they taught me well how to work hard, how to build something lasting." He looked around at the schoolhouse. "How to value learning." Daisy studied him in the golden afternoon light. There was more to Nathan Reynolds than the town gossips had suggested, more than the successful rancher or the impulsive defender of strange women's reputations. In those quiet moments between them, she glimpsed a man shaped by loss yet not broken by it. "Your mother would be proud," she said, "of what you've built here and of helping prepare the schoolhouse." Something warm flickered in his eyes, but he simply nodded and stood, extending a hand to help her up. "We should finish before we lose the light. Those bookshelves won't organize themselves." By Friday, word had spread that Nathan Reynolds had spent several days helping the new schoolteacher prepare for the term. Mrs. Winters was positively gleeful when Daisy came down for breakfast. "I heard Nathan's been quite attentive," she said, setting down a plate of eggs with unnecessary force. "Never known him to take interest in town matters before." "He's simply being neighborly," Daisy replied, determined not to feed the gossip mill. "Many people have offered help." This was true. Several town mothers had stopped by with curtains for the windows or to introduce themselves and their children. But none had spent hours working alongside her, sharing quiet conversation and comfortable silences as Nathan had. "Neighborly," Mrs. Winters repeated with a knowing smile. "Of course, and I suppose your dinner tomorrow is just neighborly too," Daisy sighed. Of course everyone knew about their dinner plans. "Mr. Reynolds and I are becoming friends, nothing more." "If you say so, dear," Mrs. Winters patted her hand. "Though I will say, you've brought a spring to that man's step I've never seen before. 5 years in this town, and I've never known Nathan Reynolds to escort a lady to dinner." Despite herself, Daisy felt a flutter of something dangerously close to anticipation at those words. She quickly suppressed it. She had not come to Willow Creek for romance, no matter how intriguing she found Nathan Reynolds. Saturday evening arrived with uncomfortable swiftness. Daisy stood before the small mirror in her room, frowning at her reflection. She had brought few dresses west, and none suitable for dining out. In the end, She chose her best navy blue dress with its modest white collar presentable enough for dinner, but nothing that could be construed as trying to impress. Precisely at 6, a knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, she momentarily lost her composure. Nathan stood before her in a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and perfectly fitted trousers. His hair was neatly combed and he held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Miss O'Sullivan," he said, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she managed, accepting the flowers. "These are beautiful. Let me put them in water before we go." As she arranged the wildflowers in a jar, she was acutely aware of Nathan's presence filling her small room. He stood with his hat in his hands, his gaze moving over her few possessions, the books stacked by her bed, the photograph of her parents on the dresser, the half-written letter to her sister. "Ready?" she asked, turning to find him studying a small sketch she had made of the schoolhouse. "You're talented," he said, nodding toward the drawing. "I didn't know you were an artist." "Hardly an artist," she demurred, "just a hobby from my school days." Nathan offered his arm, and they descended the stairs to the street where a buggy waited. The evening air was cool after the heat of the day, the sky painted in spectacular shades of orange and pink as the sun began its descent. "I thought we might drive out to the ridge for dinner," Nathan said as he helped her into the buggy. "There's a spot with a view of the whole valley." "If that's agreeable," Daisy hesitated. She had assumed they would dine at the hotel in public view. A private dinner seemed more intimate than she had anticipated. Noting her hesitation, Nathan added, "Mrs. Cooper packed us a basket. She's the cook at the ranch. Best fried chicken this side of the Mississippi." The mention of the ranch cook eased Daisy's concern somewhat. This wasn't an improper assignation, but a carefully planned outing. "That sounds lovely," she agreed. They drove out of town, the buggy wheels raising small clouds of dust as they followed the road north. The conversation flowed easily between them as Nathan pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area's history. Daisy found herself laughing at his tale of his first cattle drive, when he'd been so exhausted he'd fallen asleep in the saddle and woken up miles off course. "My foreman has never let me forget it," he said, chuckling at the memory. "Still asks if I need a map whenever I ride out alone." The ridge Nathan had mentioned proved to be a grassy plateau overlooking the valley, with Willow Creek visible as a cluster of buildings in the distance and the mountains rising majestically beyond. The sun was just touching the horizon, bathing everything in golden light. "It's breathtaking," Daisy said softly as Nathan helped her from the buggy. "I come here to think sometimes," he admitted, spreading a blanket on the grass. "Helps put things in perspective." From the basket, he produced fried chicken, biscuits, pickles, and apple pie, along with a bottle of lemonade. They ate as the sun set and the first stars appeared, their conversation ranging from books they had read to dreams they had harbored as children. "I wanted to be a sea captain," Daisy confessed, laughing at the memory. "I read too many adventure novels as a girl. My mother was horrified." "I can see it," Nathan said, his eyes twinkling in the fading light. "Captain O'Sullivan, terror of the high seas. What about you?" she asked. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" Nathan leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the darkening sky. "No, I wanted to be a lawyer, believe it or not. I even saved enough to attend one semester at a college back east." "What happened?" "My mother got sick. I came home to care for her, and after she passed, there was the ranch to run." He shrugged. "Life takes unexpected turns." "Yes," Daisy said softly, thinking of her own diverted path. "It certainly does." As darkness fell completely, Nathan built a small fire, and they sat side by side watching the flames dance. The night air grew chilly, and Daisy shivered slightly. Without a word, Nathan removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. The weight of it was comforting, carrying his warmth and a faint scent of pine and leather that she found oddly appealing. "Thank you for agreeing to dinner," Nathan said, his voice low in the darkness. "I've enjoyed getting to know you." "I've enjoyed it too," Daisy admitted. "Though I'm still not convinced it was wise," The town is already talking. Does that bother you so much? What others think? Daisy considered the question. Not for myself exactly, but as a teacher I need to maintain a certain reputation. The parents must trust me with their children. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. I understand, but in my experience this town judges people by their actions, not by gossip. You'll win them over with your dedication to the children. I hope so. She pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders. What about you? Doesn't it concern you what people say about your declaration in the saloon? In the firelight, she saw his mouth curve into a smile. I've never much cared what people think of me. I know who I am. And who is that? Daisy asked, suddenly curious to hear how this complex man viewed himself. Nathan was quiet for a moment, poking at the fire with a stick. A man who values honesty, hard work, and loyalty, who tries to do right by those who depend on him. He glanced at her. And who occasionally acts on impulse when he hears beautiful women being slandered. Daisy felt her cheeks warm and not from the fire. That's admirable, not always wise, though, he acknowledged with a self-deprecating smile. As you pointed out, they fell into comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in full brilliance above them. In Boston, Daisy had never seen so many stars. The city lights and smoke obscured all but the brightest. Here, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. We should head back, Nathan said eventually, though he made no move to stand. It's getting late. Yes, Daisy agreed, equally reluctant to end the evening. School starts Monday. I should be well rested. Nathan extinguished the fire and packed up their picnic things. The drive back to town was quieter, both of them wrapped in their thoughts. When they reached the general store, Nathan helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering slightly at her waist. Thank you for a lovely evening, Daisy said, removing his coat and handing it back to him. The pleasure was mine, he replied. Perhaps we could do it again sometime. Daisy knew she should politely decline. Their dinner had been intended as closure to the misunderstanding, not the beginning of something more, yet she found herself nodding. I would like that. Nathan's smile was warm as he took her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Miss O'Sullivan. Good night, Mr. Reynolds, she whispered, her hand tingling from his touch. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Daisy acknowledged a troubling truth. Despite her intentions and declarations, she was developing feelings for Nathan Reynolds. Feelings that complicated her carefully constructed plans for a new, independent life in Willow Creek. Monday morning brought the first day of school, and a welcome distraction from Daisy's conflicted emotions. 28 students of varying ages filed into the schoolhouse, eyeing her with a mixture of curiosity, wariness, and in some cases, outright mischief. The Weber twins, whom Nathan had warned her about, arrived last, their clothes already dusty and their grins suggesting they had plans for testing their new teacher. Daisy met their gaze calmly, having faced far more intimidating challenges in her Boston classroom. Good morning, she began, standing before them with perfect posture. I am Miss O'Sullivan, and I will be your teacher this term. In this room, we will learn together, respect one another, and work hard. I expect your best efforts, and you can expect mine in return. The morning progressed smoothly as Daisy assessed each student's abilities and organized them into appropriate learning groups. The younger children practiced their letters, while the older ones tackled more advanced reading and mathematics. By noon, she had earned, if not the respect of all her students, at least their grudging cooperation even from the Weber twins, who seemed surprised when she correctly identified which was Thomas and which was Timothy, despite their attempts to switch places. As the children ate their lunches in the schoolyard, Sarah Cooper, a shy girl of about 12, approached Daisy's desk. Miss O'Sullivan, she said hesitantly, is it true you're going to marry Mr. Reynolds? Daisy sighed inwardly but kept her expression neutral. No, Sarah. Mr. Reynolds and I are friends, that's all. You shouldn't believe everything you hear in town gossip. Sarah nodded, but didn't look entirely convinced. Pa works at the Reynolds ranch. He says Mr. Reynolds has been smiling a lot lately. Ma says it's because of you. I'm sure Mr. Reynolds has many reasons to smile, Daisy replied carefully. Now, why don't you join the others outside? It's a beautiful day. After school, Daisy remained at her desk, recording her observations of each student's abilities and planning the next day's lessons. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until a shadow fell across her papers. "How was your first day, Miss O'Sullivan?" She looked up to find Nathan leaning against the doorframe, hat in hand. The sight of him caused her heart to beat a little faster, which she firmly attributed to being startled. "It went well, thank you," she said, setting down her pen. "The children are bright and eager to learn for the most part, even the Weber twins." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Even them," she confirmed with a smile. "Though I suspect they're saving their more creative mischief for later in the week." Nathan laughed. "Smart woman, don't turn your back on them for too long." He stepped into the classroom, looking around at the now tidy space with approval. "You've made it your own already." "It's coming along," Daisy agreed. "Though we need more books, the selection is rather limited." "I might be able to help with that," Nathan said. "My mother left quite a collection. They're just gathering dust at the ranch." "That would be wonderful," Daisy said warmly. "The children would benefit greatly." Nathan nodded, then seemed to hesitate before speaking again. "There's a harvest dance this Saturday, a town tradition. I was wondering if you might accompany me." Daisy felt her resolve weakening. One private dinner was easy to explain away as friendship. Attending a town dance together would be a clear statement to everyone in Willow Creek. "I don't think that would be wise," she said reluctantly, "given the rumors already circulating." Disappointment flickered across Nathan's face, though he quickly masked it. "Of course, I understand." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Finally, Nathan cleared his throat. "Well, I should let you get back to your work. I just wanted to see how your first day went." "Thank you for checking in," Daisy said, feeling strangely bereft as he turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "The book collection, I'll have them sent over tomorrow if that suits." "That would be perfect, thank you." After he left, Daisy found it hard to concentrate on her lesson plans. The classroom felt emptier somehow without his presence. She gathered her things and walked slowly back to her room at the general store, conflicted by her growing feelings. Mrs. Winters was sweeping the front porch as Daisy approached. "There you are, dear. How was your first day with the little monsters?" "They're not monsters, Mrs. Winters," Daisy corrected gently. "Just children in need of guidance and education, if you say so." Mrs. Winters leaned on her broom. "I saw Nathan Reynolds heading toward the school earlier. Did he come calling?" Daisy suppressed a sigh. "Mr. Reynolds kindly offered to donate some books for the school library. His mother was a teacher, you know." Mrs. Winters said noncommittally. "Interesting that he's taking such a personal interest in education all of a sudden. 5 years in town, and he's never once attended a school board meeting. Perhaps he simply recognizes the importance of literacy for the community's future," Daisy suggested, heading for the stairs to escape further interrogation. "Perhaps," Mrs. Winters called after her. "Or perhaps it's the teacher, not the teaching, that interests him." Safely in her room, Daisy removed her hat and shoes, massaging her aching feet. The day had been long but rewarding. She truly enjoyed teaching, and the Willow Creek children, while certainly rougher around the edges than her Boston pupils, showed genuine enthusiasm for learning. As she prepared for bed, her thoughts kept returning to Nathan and his invitation to the harvest dance. Part of her, a growing part, wanted to accept. Their dinner together had revealed a thoughtful, intelligent man whose company she genuinely enjoyed. But accepting would mean acknowledging that something was developing between them, something beyond friendship. And that was a complication Daisy wasn't sure she was ready to face. The next morning, Daisy arrived at the schoolhouse to find a wagon parked outside and 2 ranch hands carefully carrying wooden crates inside. Nathan stood directing them, indicating where to place the boxes. "Good morning, Miss O'Sullivan," he greeted her with a tip of his hat. "I hope you don't mind the early delivery." Not at all, she replied, surprised by the number of crates, though I wasn't expecting quite so many books. My mother was something of a collector, Nathan explained, opening the nearest crate to reveal rows of neatly packed volumes. There are classics, history books, science texts, even some poetry. I thought you could choose what's appropriate for your students. Daisy knelt beside the crate, running her fingers over the leather-bound spines with reverence. These are beautiful editions. Are you certain you want to part with them? They should be read, not sitting in my study gathering dust, Nathan said. My mother would have wanted them used for education. The ranch hands finished unloading and departed with a nod to their boss, leaving Daisy and Nathan alone with the bounty of books. This is incredibly generous, Daisy said, opening a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets. The children will benefit tremendously. I'm happy to help, Nathan replied. He hesitated, then added, about the dance, Mr. Reynolds, Daisy interrupted, setting down the book. I've been thinking about your invitation. And his expression was carefully neutral. Daisy took a deep breath. I would be pleased to accompany you to the harvest dance. The smile that spread across Nathan's face made her heart skip. You would? Yes, she said firmly, but as friends, I want to be clear about that. Of course, he agreed, though his eyes held a warmth that belied his casual tone. Just friends enjoying a community event together. Exactly. Daisy nodded, trying to convince herself as much as him. Nothing more. I'll pick you up at 7 on Saturday, then. Nathan picked up his hat. The students will be arriving soon. I should let you prepare. As he reached the door, Daisy called after him, Thank you again, for the books. He turned, and for a moment the morning sunlight framed him in the doorway, giving him an almost otherworldly glow. My pleasure, Miss O'Sullivan. After he left, Daisy stood amid the crates of books, feeling as though something significant had just occurred, something beyond a simple donation to the school or an accepted invitation to a dance. Something that, despite her protestations about friendship, felt remarkably like the beginning of a journey she hadn't planned but suddenly found herself eager to embark upon. The remainder of the week passed in a blur of teaching, organizing the new books, and trying not to think too much about the upcoming dance. By Saturday evening, however, Daisy found herself standing before her mirror with uncharacteristic indecision, surveying the 2 dresses she had brought from Boston that might be suitable for such an occasion. One was a practical dark green silk that she had worn to lectures and concerts, modest and appropriate, but somewhat severe. The other was a dress she had almost left behind, a deep burgundy creation with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, its silhouette more flattering than most of her teaching attire. Her mother had insisted she pack it, just in case, though Daisy had scoffed at the idea she would need such a garment in a frontier town. After much deliberation, she chose the burgundy dress, arranging her hair in a simple but elegant style with a few curls framing her face. The result, she had to admit, was pleasing, still respectable, but with a hint of the feminine grace she typically downplayed in her professional life. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, the look on Nathan's face made all her careful preparations worthwhile. He stood momentarily speechless, his eyes taking in every detail of her appearance with undisguised appreciation. Miss O'Sullivan, he finally managed, you look absolutely stunning. Thank you, she replied, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. You look quite handsome yourself. And he did, dressed in a well-tailored dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, with a crisp white shirt and silver bolo tie. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he had clearly shaved for the occasion, his jawline clean and defined. Shall we? He asked, offering his arm. Mrs. Winters watched from behind the store counter as they departed, her expression a mixture of approval and barely contained excitement. Daisy had no doubt that by the time they reached the town hall, word of their arrival together would have preceded them. The harvest dance was held in the community hall, a large wooden building that served as church, meeting place, and social center for Willow Creek. Tonight, It was transformed with autumn decorations, dried cornstalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every surface. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the assembled townspeople. A small band played lively tunes in the corner, and several couples were already dancing. Along one wall, tables laden with food and drink attracted a steady stream of guests. The air hummed with conversation and laughter. As they entered, Daisy felt numerous eyes turn in their direction. Nathan, seemingly oblivious to the attention, guided her through the crowd with a hand lightly at the small of her back. He nodded greetings to various townspeople as they passed, stopping occasionally to introduce Daisy to those she hadn't yet met. "Would you like some punch?" Nathan asked as they reached a quieter corner. "Yes, please," Daisy replied, grateful for a moment to collect herself. As Nathan moved toward the refreshment table, Sarah Cooper's mother approached, her expression friendly but curious. "Miss O'Sullivan, how lovely to see you here," Mrs. Cooper said. "Sarah speaks very highly of you, says you've already got her interested in science of all things." "Sarah has a quick mind," Daisy replied warmly. "I think she has real potential in the natural sciences." "Well, it's a blessing to have a proper teacher again," Mrs. Cooper said. She glanced toward Nathan, who was making his way back through the crowd. "And I see you've made other connections in town as well." Before Daisy could formulate a response that wouldn't feed the gossip mill, Nathan returned with 2 cups of punch. "Evening, Mrs. Cooper. How's John's arm healing up?" "Much better, thank you for asking." "That fall from the hayloft could have been worse." Mrs. Cooper accepted the subtle change of subject with grace. "You two enjoy the dance now. It's good to see Nathan with a smile on his face for a change." As she moved away, Nathan handed Daisy her punch with an apologetic look. "Sorry about that. People here mean well, but they do love to speculate." "I'm getting used to it," Daisy said, sipping the sweet drink, "though I still wonder if coming together was wise." "Having second thoughts?" Nathan asked, his expression suddenly guarded. "No," Daisy admitted. "Despite the gossip, I'm glad I came." His face relaxed into a smile. "Good, because I was hoping you might honor me with a dance." The band had just begun a waltz, its gentle rhythm filling the hall. Daisy hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his outstretched one. "I'd be delighted." Nathan led her to the dance floor and drew her into his arms with practiced ease. His hand at her waist was firm but respectful, maintaining a proper distance between them. As they began to move with the music, Daisy was surprised by how naturally they fell into step together. "You dance well," she remarked as he guided her through a turn. "My mother insisted I learn," he replied. "Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a wounded buffalo." Daisy laughed, the sound drawing curious glances from nearby dancers. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Nathan said softly. "You remind me of her sometimes, your determination, your dedication to teaching." The comparison to a woman he clearly revered touched Daisy deeply. "I would have liked to meet her." "She would have liked you," Nathan said with certainty. "Probably would have started planning the wedding the moment she saw us together." The mention of a wedding, even hypothetically, brought Daisy back to the reality of their situation. They were drawing attention, fueling speculation. She should maintain her distance, keep things friendly but impersonal. Yet as they continued to dance, moving together as if they had done so countless times before, Daisy found it increasingly difficult to remember why she had been so determined to keep Nathan at arm's length. In his arms, with his blue eyes holding hers, the reasons seemed to fade into insignificance. The waltz ended, and they reluctantly stepped apart. Before they could decide whether to continue dancing, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. 3 men stumbled in, clearly intoxicated and looking for trouble. With a start, Daisy recognized them as the Cowboys from the Saloon, the ones whose crude remarks had prompted Nathan's impulsive declaration. The largest of the 3, the one with the scar across his cheek, spotted them immediately and nudged his companions. "Well, look here," he called loudly, his words slurring slightly. If it ain't the Boston schoolmarm and her devoted husband-to-be. The hall fell silent, all eyes turning toward them. Nathan stepped slightly in front of Daisy, his posture tense but his voice controlled. You gentlemen seem to have had enough celebration for one evening. Perhaps you should head home. Don't tell us what to do, Reynolds, the second man spat. Just because you've got money don't make you better than us. Yeah, the third chimed in. We got as much right to be here as you, more maybe. We're real cowboys, not some fancy rancher who don't even get his hands dirty no more. The scarred man took an unsteady step forward. And we got as much right to dance with the pretty teacher as you do. Ain't that right, Miss O'Sullivan? Care for a real man's company? Nathan's hand curled into a fist at his side, but before he could respond, Sheriff Miller pushed through the crowd. That's enough, Harris. You and your friends are leaving, now. We ain't done nothing wrong, Harris protested, but the sheriff's hand moved meaningfully to his gun belt. You're drunk and disruptive at a community event. That's enough for me to lock you up for the night. Your choice: leave peacefully or spend the night in my jail. For a tense moment, it seemed Harris might choose confrontation, but a look from the sheriff convinced him otherwise. With a final glare at Nathan and Daisy, he and his companions allowed themselves to be escorted out. As conversation gradually resumed around them, Nathan turned to Daisy, concern evident in his eyes. Are you all right? I'm fine, she assured him, though she felt shaken by the encounter. Though perhaps we should step outside for some air, Nathan nodded and they made their way to the door. Outside, the night was cool and clear, stars blazing overhead and a full moon casting silver light over the town. They walked in silence to a nearby bench, sitting close enough that Daisy could feel the warmth of him beside her. I'm sorry about that, Nathan said finally. Harris and his friends have been trouble ever since they arrived in town last year. They work seasonal jobs on the smaller ranches, spend most of their pay on whiskey. It's not your fault, Daisy said. Though I'm beginning to understand why you felt compelled to defend my honor that day in the saloon, if those are the kind of remarks they were making. You don't want to know, Nathan said grimly, but that's no excuse for my impulsive declaration. I should have found another way to shut them up. Perhaps, Daisy agreed, but in a strange way I'm glad you didn't. Nathan turned to look at her, surprise evident in his expression. You are, Daisy met his gaze steadily. If you hadn't made that declaration, we might never have met properly. I would have dismissed you as just another cowboy, and you might have seen me as just another Easterner who wouldn't last a year out here. I don't think I could ever have seen you as just anything, Daisy, Nathan said softly, using her first name for the first time. The intimacy of it, combined with the intensity of his gaze in the moonlight, made her breath catch. For a moment neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Finally, Nathan cleared his throat. We should probably head back inside. People will talk if we're gone too long. Let them talk, Daisy surprised herself by saying. I'm tired of worrying about what everyone thinks. A slow smile spread across Nathan's face. Miss O'Sullivan, are you suggesting we give them something worth talking about? I'm suggesting, she said carefully, that I've spent too much time denying there's anything between us when clearly there is. Nathan's expression grew serious. Daisy, I need to be clear about something. From the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, something inside me knew you were special. My declaration in the saloon might have been impulsive, but it wasn't entirely without foundation. What are you saying? Daisy asked, her heart beating faster. I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Nathan admitted. And if you give me a chance, I'd like to court you properly. No more pretense of just friends, no more worrying about town gossip. Daisy felt as though the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. This was exactly what she had come west to avoid: entanglement, dependency, the loss of the independence she had fought so hard to establish. Yet here was a man unlike any she had known, offering not to diminish her dreams but to support them, to become part of them. Nathan, she began, her voice unsteady, I came here to build a new life on my own terms, to be defined by my work, not by a relationship. "I know," he said, "and I would never ask you to give that up. Your dedication to teaching is one of the things I admire most about you." "Then what are you proposing?" "A partnership," he said simply. "Two independent people choosing to build something together, neither diminished by the other." It sounded so reasonable when he put it that way, so different from the conventional marriages she had observed, where wives became shadows of their husbands. But could such a partnership truly exist, especially in a frontier town with traditional expectations? "I need time to think," Daisy said finally. "This is all happening so fast." Nathan nodded, no disappointment visible in his expression. "Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere." He stood and offered his hand. "Now, shall we return to the dance?" "As friends, partners, or whatever we are becoming, I still enjoy your company above all others." Daisy placed her hand in his, allowing him to help her up. "Yes, let's go back, but Nathan—" "Yes, thank you, for understanding that this is difficult for me." He squeezed her hand gently. "Some things worth having don't come easily, Daisy, but that doesn't make them any less valuable." As they walked back to the hall, Daisy felt a curious lightness in her chest. Nothing was resolved, yet somehow the path ahead seemed clearer than before. Whatever she decided, she knew that Nathan Reynolds would respect her choice, and that realization made the prospect of choosing him all the more appealing. The weeks following the harvest dance brought changes to Willow Creek as autumn deepened toward winter. The schoolhouse grew colder each morning, requiring Daisy to arrive early to build up the fire before her students arrived. The children brought news of the first frost, of cattle being moved to lower pastures, of preparations for the long winter ahead. True to his word, Nathan gave Daisy the space she needed to consider his declaration. He continued to visit the schoolhouse occasionally, bringing additional books or helping with repairs, but he made no further mention of courtship. Their interactions remained friendly and increasingly comfortable, though Daisy was acutely aware of the feelings developing between them. One Friday afternoon in late October, as Daisy was dismissing her students for the weekend, Sarah Cooper lingered behind. "Miss O'Sullivan." "Can I ask you something?" The girl twisted her braid nervously. "Of course, Sarah, what is it?" "Do you love Mr. Reynolds?" The directness of the question took Daisy aback. "That's quite a personal question, Sarah, I know," the girl admitted, "but everyone wonders and no one will just ask." "And I thought, well, you always tell us to seek knowledge directly rather than rely on hearsay." Daisy couldn't help but smile at having her own teaching philosophy used against her. "That's true, but some questions don't have simple answers." "So you don't know if you love him?" Sarah pressed. Daisy considered how to respond appropriately to a 12-year-old's curiosity while still being honest. "I care for Mr. Reynolds very much, but love is complicated, especially for adults." "My pa says it's not complicated at all," Sarah said with the confidence of youth. "He says when you know, and he says Mr. Reynolds knows." "Does he now?" Daisy raised an eyebrow. "Your father seems to have insight into Mr. Reynolds' feelings." Sarah nodded earnestly. "Pa says the whole ranch knows. Says Mr. Reynolds smiles all the time now and whistles when he thinks no one's listening. And he's been fixing up the old house, the one his mother used to live in on the property. Pa says he's making it nice for someone special." This information gave Daisy pause. Nathan hadn't mentioned renovating a house, certainly not for her benefit. "I think perhaps your father is speculating, Sarah." "Maybe," the girl conceded, "but Pa's usually right about people. He says you and Mr. Reynolds are good for each other, says you make each other better." With that profound observation, Sarah grabbed her books and headed for the door. "Have a good weekend, Miss O'Sullivan." Alone in the classroom, Daisy sat at her desk, turning Sarah's words over in her mind. Was it true? Did she and Nathan make each other better? The thought was appealing, not a relationship of dependency or diminishment, but one of mutual growth and support. Her contemplation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Nathan stood there, hat in hand, looking somewhat hesitant. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Daisy said, motioning him in. I was just finishing up for the day. Nathan entered, placing a small wooden crate on her desk. I found these in another corner of the attic, thought they might be useful. Daisy opened the crate to find scientific instruments, a small microscope, glass slides, a prism, and various other tools for demonstrating basic principles of physics and biology. "Nathan, these are wonderful," she exclaimed, carefully examining the brass microscope. "The children will be fascinated. Where did they come from?" "They were my mother's," he explained. She believed in practical learning, showing rather than just telling. These were her teaching tools. Daisy looked up at him, touched by the continued generosity. "You've given so much of her legacy to the school. Are you sure you want to part with these as well? As I said before, they should be used, not hidden away." He paused, then added, "Besides, I like to think she would approve of where they're going, who they're going to." The implication hung in the air between them. Daisy set down the microscope, gathering her courage. "Sarah Cooper had some interesting things to say just now." "Oh," Nathan leaned against a nearby desk, his expression curious. "She says her father believes you're renovating a house." "For someone special." A flush crept up Nathan's neck. "John Cooper talks too much." "Is it true?" Daisy pressed gently. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, I've been fixing up my mother's old house. It's smaller than the main ranch house, cozier. It's been empty since she passed. And you're renovating it for someone special," Daisy echoed Sarah's words. "I'm renovating it because it needed renovating," Nathan said carefully. "But yes, I have had someone in mind while choosing the curtains and bookshelves." Daisy's heart quickened. "Nathan, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted. "I promised you time and I meant it. I'm not trying to pressure you." "I know," she said softly, "but I've had time to think about what you said at the harvest dance about a partnership." Nathan straightened, his eyes never leaving her face. And I think," Daisy said slowly, "that I would like to see this house you're renovating." A cautious hope dawned in Nathan's expression. "You would?" "Yes," Daisy smiled. "Perhaps this Sunday, if you're not otherwise engaged." "Sunday would be perfect," Nathan said, his voice warm with contained excitement. "I'll come for you after church. I'll be ready." After Nathan left, Daisy sat for a long time in the empty classroom, a curious sense of anticipation building within her. She hadn't given Nathan an answer yet, not explicitly. But in her heart, she knew she was moving toward one, drawn by the genuine respect and affection this remarkable man had shown her. Sunday dawned bright and clear, the late October air crisp but not yet bitter with winter's chill. After church services, where Daisy endured knowing glances from Mrs. Winters and other town gossips, Nathan appeared with a buggy to drive her to the ranch. "It's about 5 miles, he explained as he helped her up. "Not a difficult ride, but I thought you might prefer the buggy to horseback for your first visit." The countryside around Willow Creek was beautiful in autumn, the grasslands golden and the distant mountains crowned with the first snows of the season. As they rode, Nathan pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his early days building the ranch. "When I first came here, I had nothing but my horse, my mother's silver brooch to sell for seed money, and more determination than sense," he told her. "The first winter nearly broke me. Lost half my initial herd to the cold and predators." "What kept you going?" Daisy asked. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "My mother's voice in my head, I suppose. She always said that anything worth having required perseverance, and this land." He gestured to the rolling landscape around them. "Even at its harshest, there's something about it that speaks to me. I couldn't give up on it." As they crested a hill, the Reynolds ranch came into view, a sprawling operation with a large main house, several outbuildings, corrals, and pastures dotted with cattle. Several cowboys on horseback were visible in the distance, moving a small herd. "It's impressive," Daisy said honestly. "You've built something remarkable here." "It's been my life's work," Nathan acknowledged. "But lately, I've been thinking there's more to life than just work." He guided the buggy past the main house, following a smaller track that wound through a grove of cottonwood trees. Beyond the grove stood a modest but charming 2-story house, freshly painted white with green shutters. Smoke curled from the chimney and flower boxes hung from the windows, though they were empty now in the late season. "This was my parents' first home," Nathan explained as he brought the buggy to a stop. "My father built it when they were first married. After he died and I took over the ranch, we moved to the larger house, but my mother always loved this one best." Daisy could see why. While the main ranch house was impressive in size, this smaller home had a warmth and character that immediately appealed to her. It looked like a place where a family had been happy. Nathan helped her down from the buggy and led her to the front door. "Mrs. Cooper came over this morning to light the fire so it would be warm for your visit," he explained, opening the door and stepping aside to let her enter first. The interior was even more charming than the exterior. The front door opened directly into a cozy sitting room with a fireplace, where flames crackled merrily. Bookshelves lined one wall, already filled with volumes. Simple but attractive furniture was arranged to create a conversation area, and large windows let in abundant natural light. "It's lovely," Daisy said, moving further into the room. "You've done beautiful work here." "I wanted it to feel like a home again," Nathan said, watching her reaction carefully. "There's more if you'd like to see it." He showed her the dining room with its polished oak table, the kitchen with its modern iron stove and ample cupboards, and a small study that could serve equally well as a sewing room or nursery. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, a large master bedroom, and 2 smaller ones. In the master bedroom, Daisy noticed a beautiful quilt on the bed, its pattern complex and clearly handmade. "This is exquisite," she said, running her hand over the fine stitching. "My mother made it for her marriage bed," Nathan said quietly. "It's one of the few things I have left of hers." The intimacy of sharing such a personal heirloom was not lost on Daisy. She turned to find Nathan watching her with an expression of such vulnerable hope that it made her breath catch. "Nathan," she began, but he shook his head. "Before you say anything, I want to be clear," he said. "I didn't bring you here to pressure you. I'm not asking for an answer today. I just wanted you to see what I've been working on, to understand that I'm serious about building a future one I hope might include you, but that's entirely your decision." Daisy took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "When I came to Willow Creek, I was determined to build a new life on my own terms. After losing James, my fiancé, I couldn't bear the thought of becoming dependent on someone again, only to perhaps lose them." Nathan nodded, his expression somber. "I understand that fear. But these past weeks, getting to know you, seeing how you respect my work and support my independence rather than trying to diminish it, it's made me reconsider what a partnership between equals might look like." Hope kindled in Nathan's eyes, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. "You asked for time and I've taken it," Daisy said, moving closer to him. "And what I've realized is that I'm falling in love with you, Nathan Reynolds, not despite my desire for independence but alongside it." The joy that transformed Nathan's face was something Daisy knew she would remember for the rest of her life. "Daisy," he whispered, reaching for her hands. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that I would be honored to consider a courtship with you," she confirmed, her heart racing. "A proper courtship with the understanding that we're working toward a partnership of equals." Nathan brought her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I could ask for nothing more perfect." Standing there in the master bedroom of the house Nathan had so lovingly restored, Daisy felt as though pieces of her life were falling into place in a way she had never anticipated but now couldn't imagine differently. The path ahead wasn't the one she had planned, but it promised to be richer, fuller, and far less lonely than the independent life she had envisioned. "May I?" Nathan asked softly, his eyes dropping to her lips. In answer, Daisy rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his in a gentle, chaste kiss that nonetheless carried the promise of deeper passion to come. Nathan's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened slightly, still respectful but undeniably more than friendly. When they parted, both were smiling. "I suppose this will give the town something new to talk about," Daisy remarked. "Let them talk," Nathan replied, echoing her words from the harvest dance. "Some things are worth a little gossip." Hand in hand, they walked back downstairs and out onto the porch, where the late afternoon sun bathed the ranch in golden light. Standing beside Nathan, looking out over the land he had built into something remarkable through determination and hard work, Daisy felt a sense of rightness, of homecoming. The schoolteacher from Boston and the cattle rancher from the frontier might have seemed an unlikely pair to outside observers. But as they stood together on the porch of what might one day be their home, Daisy knew they had found in each other not just love, but a true partnership, one that would allow both to flourish without diminishing either. And that, she decided, was worth far more than the independence she had so fiercely guarded. For in choosing Nathan, she wasn't giving up her freedom, but expanding it, creating a future richer and more fulfilling than either could have built alone. Winter descended on Willow Creek with a ferocity that surprised even the longtime residents. By mid-November, heavy snows had made travel between outlying ranches and the town treacherous, and attendance at the schoolhouse became sporadic as parents kept children home during the worst weather. Despite the challenges, Daisy found joy in her teaching and even greater happiness in her blossoming relationship with Nathan. Their courtship proceeded with a proper respect for convention that nonetheless did little to quell the town gossip. Nathan joined her for Sunday services, escorted her to the Thanksgiving social at the church, and visited the schoolhouse regularly with books, firewood, or simply to walk her home in the early darkness of winter afternoons. By Christmas, their attachment was widely accepted as a settled matter, though no formal announcement had been made. When Nathan invited Daisy to spend Christmas Day at the ranch, along with several of his employees who had no family nearby, the invitation caused barely a ripple of scandal, particularly when Mrs. Cooper was engaged to prepare the feast and act as a nominal chaperone. Christmas at the Reynolds Ranch proved to be the warmest, most joyful holiday Daisy had experienced since childhood. The main house was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. A massive tree stood in the corner of the sitting room hung with handmade ornaments, and the smell of Mrs. Cooper's cooking filled the air. The ranch hands, initially awkward in the presence of the schoolteacher, soon relaxed as Daisy showed genuine interest in their stories and joined enthusiastically in the carols. Nathan played on his mother's old piano. After the feast and gift exchange, as the ranch hands retired to the bunkhouse and the Coopers prepared to depart for their own home, Nathan asked Daisy to remain behind for a moment. "I have one more gift for you," he said, leading her to the quieter study where a fire burned low in the grate. "Something I wanted to give you privately." From his desk drawer, he withdrew a small box wrapped in silver paper. "Merry Christmas, Daisy." Her hands trembled slightly as she unwrapped it. Inside was a velvet jeweler's box, and within that, a delicate silver ring set with a single perfect pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Nathan," she breathed, staring at the beautiful piece. "It's exquisite." "It was my grandmother's," he explained, his voice husky with emotion. "My grandfather gave it to her when he asked her to marry him. My father gave my mother a different ring, so this one came to me." Daisy looked up at him, her heart pounding. "Are you asking?" Nathan took her hands in his, the ring box between them. "Daisy O'Sullivan, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought light and learning and laughter into my world in ways I never imagined possible. I know our courtship has been relatively brief by some standards, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He dropped to one knee before her, taking the ring from its box. "I love you. I respect you. I admire your independence and your strength. And I would be honored beyond words if you would agree to be my wife, not as my possession or subordinate, but as my equal partner in all things." Tears welled in Daisy's eyes as she looked down at this strong, good man who had so unexpectedly captured her heart. The path that had led her to this moment seemed both unlikely and inevitable from the whispered gossip that had prompted Nathan's impulsive declaration to the careful, thoughtful courtship that had followed. "Yes," she whispered, and then more strongly, "Yes, Nathan. I would be honored to be your wife." His face illuminated with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Nathan rose and pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both laughing and wiping away tears, Daisy held up her hand to admire the ring in the firelight. "It's beautiful, Nathan. I'll treasure it always." "There's something else," he said, leading her to sit beside him on the small sofa near the fire. "A proposal of sorts about our future home." "The house you renovated?" Daisy asked. "Your mother's house." Nathan nodded. "Yes, I had hoped you might consider it for our home after we marry, but I've been thinking that perhaps we could make it more than that." "What do you mean?" "The town is growing," Nathan explained. "More families arriving every month. The schoolhouse in town is already crowded with your current students. What if we converted part of my mother's our house into a school for the children who live closer to the ranch? You could teach there during the week, perhaps with an assistant for the town school." Daisy stared at him, amazed by the thoughtfulness of the suggestion. "You would do that, turn part of our home into a school?" "Why not?" Nathan smiled. "Education matters to both of us. The children of the ranch hands and nearby homesteads deserve the same quality of teaching as the town children. And selfishly, it would mean you wouldn't have to travel to town in bad weather." The idea appealed to Daisy immensely, combining her love of teaching with their home life, extending education to children who might otherwise go without. "It's a wonderful idea, Nathan, truly inspired. So you approve?" His eyes crinkled with pleasure at her enthusiasm. "More than approve. I love it." She leaned forward to kiss him softly. "And I love you for understanding what matters to me and finding ways to make it part of our life together." They spent the remainder of the evening planning their future, the wedding, to be held in the spring when travel would be easier for Daisy's family from Boston. The school arrangements, their life on the ranch. Every detail they discussed further confirmed for Daisy that in Nathan, she had found not just a husband, but a true partner who valued her mind and ambitions as much as her heart. As he drove her back to town that night, the stars brilliant in the clear winter sky and the snow-covered landscape gleaming in the moonlight, Daisy reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. If anyone had told her 6 months ago that she would be engaged to a cattle rancher by Christmas, she would have laughed in disbelief. Yet here she was, her heart fuller than she had ever imagined possible, a beautiful ring on her finger and a future stretching before her that promised both the independence she cherished and the partnership she had never known she needed. Happy? Nathan asked softly, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Perfectly," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Just thinking about how sometimes the best journeys take us places we never planned to go." Nathan smiled, pulling her closer against the cold. "And sometimes, the right destination finds us even when we're determined to go elsewhere." "Indeed," Daisy agreed, resting her head on his shoulder as the buggy carried them through the winter night. "Though I imagine the town gossips will claim they knew all along this was where we'd end up." "Well," Nathan chuckled, "for once the gossip in the saloon will have gotten something right." The story of how Nathan Reynolds had boldly declared Daisy O'Sullivan his future wife before they'd even met became a favorite tale in Willow Creek, told and retold at gatherings for years to come. And when they were married the following spring in a ceremony that brought together the entire community, not even the most cynical observer could doubt the genuine love and respect that bound them. As for Harris and his troublemaking friends, they were notably absent from the wedding celebrations. Word had it they'd moved on to another town after one too many confrontations with Sheriff Miller. Their departure was little noted, and less mourned, merely a footnote in the greater story of Nathan and Daisy Reynolds, whose partnership would shape the education and future of Willow Creek for decades to come. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Nathan presented Daisy with a hand-carved sign for the schoolroom they had established in their home. Reynolds School for Progressive Education, it read, and beneath that, in smaller letters, "Where futures begin. Do you approve?" He asked as she traced the letters with her fingers. "It's perfect," she replied, her free hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where their first child grew. "Absolutely perfect." And as she stood in the doorway of their home with her husband's arm around her waist, watching the children of ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders playing in the yard before their afternoon lessons, Daisy reflected that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings, even those born of saloon gossip and impulsive declarations, could lead to the most beautiful destinies. The sound of galloping hooves in the distance announced the arrival of a rider, and Nathan shaded his eyes against the afternoon sun. "That'll be John Cooper with the mail," he said. "Maybe we'll finally have that letter from your sister about her visit." As they watched the rider approach, Daisy leaned into her husband's embrace, perfectly content in the knowledge that the life they were building together, teaching the children, running the ranch, preparing for their own child, was richer and more fulfilling than any she could have imagined when she first stepped off the stagecoach in Willow Creek. Some journeys, she had learned, were worth every unexpected turn and challenge along the way. And some destinations, once reached, proved to be just the beginning of even greater adventures.